I thought I knew my parents until New Year's Eve 2024 when they handed out gifts to all the grandchildren who made them proud that year. My wife Sarah and I arrived at their house with our 8-year-old son, Tommy, and 6-year-old daughter, Emma, expecting the usual warm family celebration. The living room sparkled with gold streamers and champagne glasses lined the kitchen counter. My siblings Marcus, Beth, and David were already there with their kids, everyone laughing and sharing stories about the year. When Dad stood up with a stack of beautifully wrapped presents and announced gift time for all the grandchildren who made the family proud, I smiled and waited for my children's names to be called. They never were. The silence in my Honda Accord felt suffocating as I drove through the empty streets of suburban Cleveland. In the rearview mirror, I could see Tommy pressing his face against the window, tears streaming down his cheeks, while Emma clutched her worn stuffed rabbit and whispered questions that broke my heart. Sarah reached back and rubbed Emma's knee, her own eyes filled with unshed tears. "Daddy, why didn't Grandpa call our names?" Tommy's voice cracked with confusion. "Did we do something bad?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. How could I explain to my children that their grandparents had deliberately excluded them from a family tradition? How could I tell them that the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally had chosen to humiliate them in front of their cousins? "You didn't do anything wrong, buddy." I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes." Sarah turned to face me, her expression a mixture of anger and devastation. "That wasn't a mistake, Herbert. That was planned. I heard Janet whispering to your cousin Lisa during dinner about how some people need to learn responsibility before their children can be rewarded." My stomach churned as the pieces began falling into place. Janet, my brother Marcus's wife, had always been vocal about her opinions on proper family hierarchy. She believed children should only receive recognition when their parents demonstrated what she called appropriate life choices. The 20-minute drive home felt like hours. Every red light gave me more time to replay the evening's events. I remembered the way my mother Dorothy had avoided eye contact when she helped distribute the presents. I remembered how my father George had cleared his throat awkwardly when Tommy asked if there were any more gifts to hand out. Most painfully, I remembered the uncomfortable laughter that filled the room when my nephew Jake loudly asked why Herbert's kids didn't get anything. "Just a mix-up," my sister Beth had said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. "Some years are different than others," my father had added, but he wouldn't look at me when he said it. As we pulled into our driveway, I realized this wasn't about forgotten gifts or holiday chaos. This was about the fact that 6 months ago, I had quit my corporate marketing job to focus on my freelance graphic design business. It was about the disapproving conversations I'd overheard at family gatherings. It was about my parents' belief that I had somehow failed as a provider and father by choosing a non-traditional career path. Inside our modest 2-story house, Sarah helped the children get ready for bed, while I sat in our kitchen staring at my phone. The family group chat was buzzing with messages about what a wonderful evening it had been, but no one mentioned the elephant in the room. No one acknowledged that 2 children had been excluded from a family celebration. I thought about my father's recent comments about real men providing stability for their families. I thought about my mother's concerned questions about whether we had enough money saved for emergencies. I thought about Marcus's condescending advice about returning to corporate life before it was too late to rebuild my career. The truth was, my freelance business was actually thriving. I'd built a client base that paid me more per project than my corporate salary had provided per month. But I'd kept my financial success private, preferring to let my work speak for itself rather than boast about income. I'd even been deliberately modest about our lifestyle, driving an older car and shopping at discount stores to avoid creating jealousy or expectations within the family. That discretion had apparently backfired spectacularly. Sarah came downstairs after tucking the children into bed, her face flushed with anger. "Herbert, I need to show you something." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through screenshots she'd taken during the party. I was suspicious about the gift situation, so I looked over Janet's shoulder while she was texting. My blood ran cold as I read the messages. The family group chat had been buzzing for weeks with discussions about my disappointing life choices and irresponsible career decisions. My own mother had actively participated, suggesting that my children didn't deserve rewards when their father couldn't provide properly. "Look at this one from 3 days ago," Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury. She showed me a message from my father. "Dorothy thinks we should send a clear message about priorities. Maybe if Herbert sees how his choices affect his kids, he'll come to his senses." The gift exclusion hadn't been a spontaneous oversight. It had been carefully orchestrated psychological warfare designed to humiliate me and my children in front of the entire extended family. My parents had used my children as weapons in their campaign to force me back into corporate life. I stared at the evidence of my family's betrayal, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. These people who claimed to love my children had deliberately chosen to hurt them, to make a point about my career choices. They had turned a joyful holiday celebration into a cruel lesson about conformity and control. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked quietly. I looked up the stairs toward my children's bedrooms, thinking about Tommy's confused tears and Emma's whispered questions. Then I opened my phone and began typing a message that would change everything. The next morning, January 1st, I woke up with crystal clear purpose. While Sarah made coffee and the children slept in after their traumatic evening, I crafted the message that had been forming in my mind all night. I typed carefully, "Hope you enjoyed the celebration last night. Thank you for showing my children exactly where they stand in this family's priorities. We won't be attending another family gathering until you can treat all grandchildren with equal respect and dignity. Happy New Year." I read it 3 times, then hit send and immediately turned off my phone. Sarah looked over my shoulder and nodded approvingly. "Good. They need to understand there are consequences for cruelty." Within 30 minutes of turning my phone back on, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The family was in complete meltdown mode. My sister Beth had called 6 times, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. "Herbert called me back immediately. You're completely overreacting and making this so much worse than it needs to be. Mom is crying and Dad is furious. You need to fix this before you ruin everything." Marcus had sent a series of angry texts that grew more aggressive with each message. "Are you seriously going to destroy our family over some presents? Grow up and stop being so sensitive. Your kids will get over it, but this drama you're creating is going to hurt everyone." Even my youngest brother David, usually the peacemaker, had weighed in. "I know last night was awkward, but this response is really extreme. Can't we just talk this through like adults?" But the message that hit me hardest came from my mother, Herbert. "I'm disappointed in your reaction. We've always supported your family, and this kind of public embarrassment is beneath you. Your children are watching how you handle disagreements, and you're teaching them to run away from problems instead of working through them." The irony was staggering. My mother was lecturing me about teaching my children proper behavior while completely ignoring the lesson her own behavior had taught them the night before. Sarah found me in our living room scrolling through the messages with growing disbelief. "Listen to this," I said, reading Marcus's latest text aloud. "He says I'm being dramatic and that kids don't even remember holiday disappointments anyway. That's rich coming from someone whose 5-year-old daughter still talks about the birthday party where she didn't get invited to play with the other kids," Sarah replied sarcastically. The children came downstairs around 10:30, still subdued from the previous evening. Emma climbed into my lap while Tommy sprawled on the couch next to Sarah. They both looked tired and confused. "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" Emma asked softly. "No, sweetheart, you and Tommy didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups need time to think about how they treat each other." Tommy looked up from his cereal. "Are we still going to see Grandma and Grandpa? When they're ready to apologize and treat you with kindness, yes. But not until then." My phone rang again. This time it was my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old widow who lived next door to my parents and had become something of a family friend over the years. "Herbert, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I have something I think you should know about." Mrs. Patterson explained that she'd been taking her morning walk when she noticed my father and Marcus throwing away dozens of wrapped presents in their garage. "I thought it was such a waste," she said. "I even took some pictures with my phone because I couldn't believe anyone would throw away so many beautiful gifts." She texted me the photos immediately. My hands shook as I enlarged the images on my phone screen. They're clearly visible in my parents' garbage bags were wrapped presents with tags that read for Tommy and for Emma. The gifts had been purchased, wrapped, and labeled for my children, then deliberately withheld and discarded. Sarah gasped when she saw the photos. They bought presents for the kids and chose to throw them away rather than give them out. This wasn't about money or forgetting. This was calculated cruelty. I showed the images to Tommy and Emma, explaining gently that their grandparents had made a very poor choice, but that it reflected their grandparents' problems, not anything wrong with them. "So they did buy us presents?" Tommy asked, his voice small and hopeful. "Yes, buddy. They bought them and then decided to hurt your feelings on purpose. That's not okay, and that's why we're not going to visit them right now." Emma studied the photos carefully. "Why would they want to hurt our feelings? Sometimes adults make really bad decisions when they're angry or upset about other things. But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean you deserve to be treated that way." The afternoon brought more calls and texts, but now I was armed with photographic evidence of my family's deliberate cruelty. When Beth called again demanding that I stop this nonsense and come apologize, I sent her the photos Mrs. Patterson had taken. The line went quiet for a long moment, then Beth's voice much smaller. "Oh my God, Herbert. I had no idea they actually bought presents for the kids. And then threw them away rather than admit they were wrong to exclude my children in the first place," I added. "This is so much worse than I thought. I need to call Mom." By evening, the family group chat had gone completely silent. The photos had been shared, and everyone now understood that this wasn't about forgotten gifts or holiday confusion. This was about adults who had deliberately chosen to emotionally abuse children to make a point about their father's career choices. I tucked Tommy and Emma into bed that night, promising them that they would never again be put in a situation where family members could hurt them so deliberately. As I turned off their bedroom lights, I realized that standing up to my family's toxic behavior was the most important gift I could give my children. I was teaching them that they deserved respect and that someone would always fight for their dignity, even when it meant challenging people we're supposed to love unconditionally. The next morning would bring new challenges, but I was ready. My family had shown their true colors, and now it was time for them to face the consequences of their choices. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in my home office working on a logo design for a tech startup in Austin when the doorbell rang aggressively. Through the front window, I could see my mother's silver Buick parked in our driveway, and Dorothy herself standing on our porch with her arms crossed and her mouth set in a grim line. "Herbert James Mitchell, you open this door right now," she called through the glass. "We need to discuss this ridiculous tantrum you're throwing." Sarah appeared beside me, still in her bathrobe with her coffee mug in hand. "Should I call someone?" she whispered. "No, let's see what she has to say for herself." I opened the door but didn't invite my mother inside. Dorothy pushed past me anyway, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her chest. "What exactly do you think you're accomplishing with this dramatic nonsense? Your father hasn't slept in 2 days, and the entire family is upset because of your overreaction." Overreaction. I repeated, genuinely amazed by her audacity. "Mom, you deliberately excluded my children from a family tradition to punish me for my career choices. You threw away their Christmas presents rather than admit you were wrong." "Those children need to understand that actions have consequences," Dorothy replied. settling herself on our couch without invitation. When parents make irresponsible decisions, the whole family suffers. Sarah stepped forward, her voice deadly calm. Those children are 8 and 6 years old, Dorothy. They don't understand corporate politics or career strategies. They just know their grandmother hurt their feelings on purpose. Their father hurt their feelings by refusing to provide stability and security. I was simply illustrating the natural consequences of his choices. I felt my anger building, but before I could respond, my phone rang. George's contact appeared on the screen, and I answered on speaker. "Herbert, this has gone far enough." My father's voice boomed through the living room. "You've embarrassed our family, upset your mother, and created chaos over something that could have been handled privately. I'm calling to tell you that Marcus has a solution." "Oh, really? What kind of solution does Marcus have?" "He's offering you a position at his accounting firm. Entry level, but it comes with health benefits and a steady paycheck. You could start next week and put this freelance experiment behind you." I looked at Sarah, who was shaking her head vigorously. "Dad, I'm not interested in working for Marcus. My business is doing fine." "Your business?" Dorothy laughed bitterly. "Herbert, you design websites for small companies. That's not a business, that's a hobby that you've convinced yourself is a career. Actually, Mom, my business generated more revenue last year than Marcus made at his firm. I just haven't felt the need to brag about it." The phone went quiet for a moment. Then George's voice, more cautious now. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, another car pulled into our driveway. Marcus and Janet climbed out of their BMW, both wearing expressions of grim determination. Within minutes, they were standing in our living room alongside Dorothy, creating an impromptu family intervention. "We're here because this situation has gotten completely out of hand," Janet announced, perching on the edge of our coffee table like she was conducting a business meeting. "Herbert, your emotional outburst is affecting the entire family dynamic, and we need to find a practical solution." Marcus nodded authoritatively. "The job offer stands, but you'd need to relocate to Columbus to be close to our main office. We could help you find an apartment, and the kids could start fresh in a new school district." "Relocate." Sarah's voice rose dangerously. "You want us to uproot our entire life because you can't handle Herbert's success in his chosen field." "Success." Janet laughed. "Sarah, we're trying to help Herbert transition back to responsible adult employment before his midlife crisis does permanent damage to his family's future." "And what about the damage you've already done to his children?" Sarah shot back. "What about the trauma you created by excluding them from family celebrations?" The room erupted in overlapping arguments. Dorothy insisted that tough love was sometimes necessary to guide family members toward better choices. Marcus explained that his job offer came with opportunities for advancement that freelance work could never provide. Janet detailed the benefits package and retirement planning options that corporate employment offered. Through all of this, I noticed that no one had apologized for hurting my children. No one had acknowledged that using kids as pawns in adult disagreements was fundamentally wrong. They were so focused on proving their point about my career choices that they couldn't see the cruelty they'd inflicted on innocent children. "Stop," I said loudly, cutting through the arguments. "Everyone just stop talking for a minute." The room fell silent except for the sound of Tommy and Emma's footsteps on the stairs. They'd been awakened by the shouting and were now sitting on the steps, listening to adults argue about their father's worthiness as a provider and parent. Emma ran down the stairs and climbed into my lap, her eyes wide with confusion. Tommy followed more cautiously, standing beside Sarah's chair. "Why is everyone yelling?" Emma asked softly. Dorothy immediately softened her voice. "We're just discussing some grown-up things, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." "Are you still mad at us?" Tommy asked his grandmother directly. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Dorothy opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Janet suddenly became very interested in examining her manicured fingernails. "They're not mad at you. I told my children. They're upset with me for making choices they don't understand. But that's not your fault, and it's not your problem to fix. Emma looked at her grandmother with the devastating honesty that only children possess. Grandma, why did you throw our presents in the garbage? Mrs. Patterson showed Daddy the pictures. The color drained from Dorothy's face. She hadn't realized we knew about the discarded gifts. Sweetheart, that's complicated. It seems simple to me, Tommy said with 8-year-old logic. Either you wanted to give us presents or you didn't. If you didn't want to, that's okay. But why buy them and then throw them away? Janet shifted uncomfortably. Tommy, sometimes adults make decisions that seem confusing to children, but there are reasons. What reasons? Emma pressed. What did we do wrong? The silence stretched on until it became unbearable. Finally, Marcus spoke up. His voice strained. You didn't do anything wrong. This is about your father's choices, not yours. But we're the ones who got hurt, Tommy pointed out with devastating simplicity. I watched my family struggle to defend the indefensible. They'd created an elaborate justification for their cruelty. But when confronted by the children they'd actually harmed, their reasoning crumbled completely. Sarah stood up, her patience finally exhausted. I think this conversation is over. Dorothy, Marcus, Janet, you need to leave our house now. We're trying to help, Marcus protested. No, you're trying to control, I corrected. You're trying to force me into making choices that serve your vision of how families should work, regardless of how those choices affect my wife and children. As they gathered their coats and prepared to leave, Janet turned back with one final attempt at manipulation. Herbert, I hope you realize you're teaching your children to run away from family instead of working through difficult situations. Actually, I replied, I'm teaching them that they deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, even by family members. I'm teaching them that some behavior is unacceptable, regardless of who's engaging in it. After they left, I sat with Tommy and Emma on our couch, trying to process what had just happened. My family had spent an hour in our living room, without once acknowledging that they'd hurt my children. They'd focused entirely on justifying their actions and pressuring me to conform to their expectations. But something important had happened during that confrontation. In demanding explanations from their grandmother, my children had forced the family to confront the reality of their choices. The adults could rationalize their behavior to each other, but they couldn't explain it to the children they'd actually harmed. That evening, as I tucked Tommy and Emma into bed, Emma asked, Daddy, are we still part of the family? You will always be part of our family, I assured her. And when your grandparents and uncle are ready to treat you with kindness and respect, we'll be part of their family again too. What if they're never ready? Tommy asked. Then we'll build an even stronger family with the people who do love and respect us, I replied. As I turned off their bedroom lights, I realized that my family's intervention had backfired completely. Instead of pressuring me into submission, they'd revealed the depth of their dysfunction and their complete inability to acknowledge wrongdoing. They'd shown my children exactly why we needed boundaries, and they'd strengthened my resolve to protect my family from further emotional abuse. The next day would bring even more shocking revelations, but I was no longer afraid of what my family might do. I was finally ready to fight back. Wednesday afternoon brought a call that changed everything. I was reviewing client contracts when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a professional voice introduced herself as Detective Linda Chen from the Cleveland Police Department's white-collar crime unit. Mr. Mitchell, I'm calling because your name has come up in connection with an ongoing investigation into financial irregularities at George Mitchell's small business. Are you available to answer some questions? My heart stopped. My father's business. What kind of financial irregularities? We've received reports of potential embezzlement. Your father filed a complaint yesterday after discovering discrepancies in his business accounts. During our preliminary investigation, your name appeared on several financial documents, and we need to clarify your role in the company's operations. I explained that I'd never been involved in my father's hardware store business beyond occasionally helping with their website design. Detective Chen seemed satisfied with my responses, but what she told me next left me speechless. "Mr. Mitchell, are you aware that someone has been systematically transferring money from your father's business accounts for approximately 2 years? We're looking at a total theft of nearly $45,000. The room spun around me. $45,000 was enough to devastate my father's small business and personal finances. No wonder my parents had been stressed about money lately. No wonder they'd been so concerned about everyone's financial stability. Detective, do you have any suspects? We're still investigating, but the transfers were made by someone with administrative access to the business banking system. Your father is providing us with a list of people who have that level of access." After Detective Chen hung up, I sat in my office trying to process this information. Someone in my family had been stealing from my father's business, while I was being blamed for financial irresponsibility. Someone had been systematically destroying my parents' security while pointing fingers at my career choices. My phone rang again. This time it was George, his voice shaking with exhaustion and stress. "Herbert, I need to tell you something. The police called me about missing money from the business accounts. I've been trying to figure out who could have access to our banking system, and I realized I need to ask you directly. Have you ever used our business credit cards or accessed our accounts?" "Dad, no. I've never had access to your business finances." I told Detective Chen the same thing. "But I need to ask you something too. How much money has been stolen?" George was quiet for a long moment. "Almost $45,000 over 2 years. It started small, just a few hundred here and there, but it escalated significantly over the past 6 months. A chill ran down my spine. "Dad, the past 6 months is when you and Mom started pressuring me about financial responsibility and career stability." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone has been stealing from you while using me as a scapegoat to divert attention from the real problem." That evening, Sarah and I drove to my parents' house for an emergency family meeting. George had called everyone together to discuss the investigation, and for the first time in months, the focus wasn't on my career choices. We gathered in the same living room where the New Year's Eve gift ceremony had taken place. Dorothy looked exhausted, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and her makeup smudged from crying. George sat beside her holding a folder full of bank statements and police reports. Marcus and Janet arrived late, both looking unusually subdued. Beth and David completed the circle, their faces grim with concern. "The police have confirmed that someone has been stealing from my business for 2 years." George began without preamble. "They need to interview everyone who has had access to our financial systems." Marcus shifted in his chair. "Dad, what kind of access are we talking about? I mean, I help with bookkeeping sometimes, but that's just organizing receipts and invoices. The detective says the thief had administrative access to our banking system. They were able to make electronic transfers and authorize payments." Janet reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. "Honey, didn't you help your dad set up online banking a couple years ago?" The room fell silent. Marcus's face went pale and he started stammering. "I mean, yes, I helped with the initial setup, but I didn't keep access after that." George pulled out a notebook. "Marcus, the police need a complete list of every time you accessed our business accounts. They're tracing all the unauthorized transactions." "Dad, I can't remember every time I logged in to check something for you. It's been 2 years." "Then we'll let the police sort it out," George replied firmly. Over the next hour, the family discussed the investigation and its implications. Marcus grew increasingly agitated, deflecting questions and making nervous jokes about police procedures. Janet kept checking her phone and excusing herself to take calls. Finally, Beth asked the question everyone was thinking. "Marcus, is there anything you need to tell us before the police interview you?" Marcus stood up abruptly. "I don't like what you're implying. I've been helping Dad with his business out of family loyalty, and now I'm being treated like a criminal." "No one's treating you like a criminal," Dorothy said gently. "We just need to understand what happened to all that money." Maybe you should ask Herbert, Marcus snapped. He's the one who's been struggling financially. He's the one who quit his job and started freelancing. Maybe the police should be looking at him. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Everyone stared at Marcus, whose face was flushed with anger and something that looked suspiciously like panic. I stood up slowly. Marcus, are you seriously trying to blame me for theft from Dad's business? When I've never had access to his accounts? No. You've had financial problems. You've been stressed about money. Maybe you found a way to access the accounts. Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Marcus Herbert hasn't had financial problems. His freelance business has been incredibly successful. In fact, he's been secretly helping your parents with their mortgage payments for the past 6 months. The room erupted in shocked voices. Dorothy and George stared at me with wide eyes. What mortgage payments? George demanded. I sighed, realizing my financial privacy was about to end. Dad, you've been receiving anonymous payments toward your mortgage principal for 6 months. I've been making those payments because I knew you were stressed about money, but I didn't want to embarrass you by making a big deal about it. Dorothy started crying. Herbert, you've been helping us financially while we've been criticizing you for being irresponsible. I didn't want recognition, I just wanted to help. Marcus was backing toward the door, his face now completely white. This is insane. You people are looking for someone to blame and you're creating conspiracy theories. Marcus, George said quietly, sit down. We need to finish this conversation. No, I think Janet and I should leave. This family meeting has turned into an interrogation and I don't appreciate being treated like a suspect. Maybe that's because you're acting like one, David said bluntly. As Marcus and Janet gathered their coats, George made a decision that surprised everyone. Marcus, before you leave, I need you to surrender any access you have to my business accounts. Right now. Dad, I told you I don't have current access. Then you won't mind if I change all the passwords and security codes immediately. Marcus's panic was now visible to everyone in the room. Fine, change whatever you want. But don't call me when you need help with your bookkeeping. After they left, the remaining family members sat in stunned silence. The evening had revealed not only the existence of ongoing theft, but also the fact that I'd been secretly supporting my parents while being blamed for financial irresponsibility. Herbert, Dorothy whispered, I'm so sorry. We've been treating you terribly while you've been helping us. The question now, George said grimly, is whether Marcus is involved in the missing money. His reaction tonight was not normal. Detective Chen called the next morning with an update. The investigation had revealed that the bulk of the stolen money had been transferred to accounts belonging to Janet's boutique clothing business and Marcus's personal credit cards. We'll be arresting your brother this afternoon, she informed me. The evidence is overwhelming. Bank records show he's been systematically transferring money from your father's business to cover his wife's business losses and their personal debts. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Marcus hadn't just been stealing money. He'd been stealing my family's trust, turning them against me to create a distraction from his crimes. The New Year's Eve gift ceremony hadn't just been about career disapproval. It had been part of a larger campaign to make me the family scapegoat while Marcus covered his tracks. The call came at 2:30 that afternoon. Marcus had been arrested at his office, and Janet was cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. The family's golden boy, the responsible corporate employee, who'd always criticized my unconventional choices, had been a criminal all along. That evening, I sat with Tommy and Emma in our living room, trying to explain why their uncle wouldn't be coming to family gatherings for a while. So Uncle Marcus was taking money that didn't belong to him? Tommy asked. Yes, buddy, he was stealing from Grandpa's business. And that's why Grandpa and Grandma were worried about money. Exactly. Emma thought about this for a moment. So when they said you were bad with money, they were wrong. They were wrong about a lot of things, sweetheart. As I tucked my children into bed that night, I realized that justice was finally being served. The truth about my family's dysfunction was emerging, and the real criminals were being exposed. My decision to stand up for my children's dignity had inadvertently uncovered a much deeper betrayal that could have destroyed my parents' financial future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the family grappled with Marcus's crimes and their own complicity in blaming the wrong person. But for the first time since New Year's Eve, I felt like we were moving toward real resolution and healing. Thursday morning brought chaos to the entire family. George called me at 7:30, his voice hollow with disbelief and exhaustion. "Herbert, I need you to come over. The police found something else." When Sarah and I arrived at my parents' house, we found Detective Chen sitting at the kitchen table with a cardboard box full of documents and computer printouts. George and Dorothy looked like they'd aged 10 years overnight. "Mr. Mitchell," Detective Chen addressed me, "we've uncovered evidence that suggests this theft was more extensive than we initially realized. Your brother wasn't just stealing money, he was actively sabotaging business relationships and potentially planning to damage your freelance business as well." She opened a folder and spread several printed emails across the table. "We found these on Marcus's computer during our search warrant execution. He'd been sending emails to your father's suppliers, claiming the business was in financial trouble and requesting extended payment terms. He was creating artificial financial stress to justify the missing money." George picked up one of the printouts, his hands shaking. "He told me these suppliers were having their own financial problems and needed to delay payments. I believed him because he handled most of my vendor communications." "There's more," Detective Chen continued. "We also found files containing information about Mr. Herbert Mitchell's freelance business, including client contact information, project details, and what appears to be a plan to contact those clients with false complaints." Sarah gasped. "He was going to sabotage Herbert's business." Detective Chen nodded grimly. "We found draft emails claiming that Mr. Mitchell had missed deadlines, delivered poor quality work, and was unreliable. These emails were scheduled to be sent to his major clients over the next few weeks." I stared at the evidence spread across my parents' kitchen table, feeling a mixture of rage and vindication. Marcus hadn't just been stealing money, he'd been orchestrating a comprehensive campaign to destroy my reputation and force me into financial dependence. "Detective, were any of those emails actually sent?" "3 were sent last week, but your client relationships appear to be strong enough that they reached out to verify the complaints rather than simply terminating contracts. Your client's loyalty actually protected you from this sabotage attempt." George buried his face in his hands. "My own son was destroying my business while trying to destroy his brother's career. How did I miss this?" Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Herbert, I'm so ashamed. We blamed you for irresponsibility while Marcus was systematically stealing from us and planning to ruin your livelihood." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Detective Chen organizing documents. Finally, she spoke again. "Mr. Mitchell, there's one more thing. We need to discuss Marcus's motivation for these crimes." She pulled out a notebook that looked like a personal journal. "We found this in Marcus's desk at home. It contains entries dating back several years detailing his resentment of your success and happiness." I took the notebook with trembling hands and began reading Marcus's handwritten entries. The pages revealed a level of jealousy and bitterness that took my breath away. March 15th, 2022. I read aloud. "Herbert got another major client today. He acts like his freelance work is so important, but he's just playing around while real men build careers. Janet says I work twice as hard for half the recognition." August 3rd, 2022. "Herbert bought new furniture for his house. Where is he getting this money? His freelance thing can't be paying that well. Something doesn't add up." December 10th, 2023. "Herbert seems so confident and happy all the time. It's not fair that everything comes so easily to him while I struggle to make ends meet." The entries became darker and more specific as they progressed. Marcus had documented my successes while simultaneously planning ways to undermine them. He'd noted my client acquisitions project completions and family milestones with increasing resentment. January 28th, 2024. I continued reading. "Herbert's business is doing better than he admits. I can tell by the way he talks about projects and timelines. Meanwhile, Janet's boutique is hemorrhaging money, and Dad's business barely breaks even. It's not fair that Herbert gets to succeed while we struggle. February 15th, 2024. I found Herbert's business banking information in Dad's computer when I was helping with bookkeeping. His account balances are much higher than I expected. He's been lying about his financial situation while we worry about money. Sarah leaned over my shoulder to read the final entries. March 1st, 2024. I've been thinking about Herbert's success and our family's problems. Maybe if Herbert experienced some real financial pressure, he'd understand what the rest of us go through. Maybe if his clients started questioning his reliability, he'd realize how good he had it. The notebook revealed that Marcus's theft hadn't been motivated by desperate financial need. It had been motivated by jealousy of my success and a twisted desire to level the playing field between us. Detective Chen closed her folder. Mr. Mitchell, your brother has confessed to the theft charges, but we're also pursuing fraud charges related to the vendor manipulation and attempted business sabotage. His wife Janet is cooperating fully and has provided additional evidence about their financial situation. What kind of additional evidence? George asked. Janet's boutique business has been losing money for over a year, but instead of closing it or seeking help, they've been using stolen funds to keep it operating. Janet claims she didn't know the money was stolen, but she admits she didn't ask questions when Marcus suddenly had extra cash available. After Detective Chen left my parents, and I sat in their kitchen trying to process the magnitude of Marcus's betrayal. He hadn't just stolen money, he'd systematically manipulated family dynamics to cover his crimes while attempting to destroy my reputation and livelihood. Herbert, George said finally, I need to ask for your forgiveness. We allowed Marcus to poison our perception of you while he was actually the one causing our problems. Dad, you didn't know? Marcus was very convincing. But we should have known you better, Dorothy added. We should have trusted your character instead of listening to his manipulation. That afternoon, Beth and David came over to discuss the family crisis. Both were devastated by the revelation of Marcus's crimes and their own complicity in treating me unfairly. I feel like such an idiot, Beth said, tears streaming down her face. I actually defended Marcus when you sent that group text about the New Year's Eve gifts. I told people you were overreacting when you were actually protecting your children from a truly toxic situation. David nodded grimly. Marcus convinced all of us that you were the problem when he was actually manipulating everyone to hide his crimes. As we talked through the timeline of events, a pattern emerged. Every time Marcus's theft had escalated, his criticism of my choices had intensified. When he'd started stealing larger amounts in the fall, he'd simultaneously launched his campaign about my need to return to corporate employment. The New Year's Eve gifts ceremony had occurred right after his largest theft, suggesting that the family drama had been deliberately created to distract from his increasing desperation. He used our love for this family against us, George said with quiet anger. He turned us into weapons against you while he was destroying everything we'd worked to build. That evening, I called my children into our living room for another family meeting. They'd been hearing phone conversations and seeing police cars at their grandparents' house, and they deserved age-appropriate explanations. Remember how we talked about Uncle Marcus taking money that didn't belong to him? I began. Yes, Tommy replied, like stealing. Well, the police found out that Uncle Marcus was also trying to hurt Daddy's work by telling lies to the people who hire me. Emma's eyes grew wide. He was trying to get you in trouble at work. Exactly, he was jealous of Daddy's success, so he wanted to make people think Daddy was bad at his job. That's really mean, Tommy said indignantly. Yes, it is. And it helps explain why Grandma and Grandpa were so worried about money and why they treated you unfairly on New Year's Eve. So it really wasn't about us, Emma asked. It was never about you, sweetheart. It was about Uncle Marcus's problems and the lies he told to hide what he was doing. As I tucked the children into bed that night, Tommy asked, "Daddy, are you glad you found out the truth?" "I'm glad the truth came out, buddy. But I'm sad that Uncle Marcus made such bad choices and hurt so many people." "Will he go to jail?" "Probably. When people steal money and lie about it, there are serious consequences." "Good," Emma said firmly. "People shouldn't be mean to kids or steal money from grandpas." Looking back on the events of the past week, I realized that my decision to protect my children from family dysfunction had inadvertently exposed crimes that could have destroyed my parents' financial security. By refusing to tolerate the emotional abuse of my children, I'd created the circumstances that led to the discovery of much deeper betrayals. Justice was finally being served, but the process of rebuilding trust and healing our family relationships was just beginning. 3 weeks after Marcus's arrest, I found myself sitting in my parents' living room on a Saturday afternoon watching Tommy and Emma play with new toys that Dorothy and George had insisted on buying for them. The atmosphere was completely different from our previous family gatherings. The tension and underlying criticism had been replaced with genuine warmth and respect. "Herbert," Dorothy said, settling into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea. "I've been thinking about what we put you and the children through, and I need to say something important." She paused, gathering her thoughts carefully. "When Marcus was manipulating our perceptions of your choices, we allowed ourselves to believe things about you that we should have known weren't true. We forgot that we raised you to be honest, hardworking, and responsible. We forgot that you've always made thoughtful decisions, even when they weren't conventional." George nodded from his recliner. "Your mother's right. We let someone else's jealousy and dishonesty cloud our judgment about our own son." Over the past 3 weeks, the family had been working through the aftermath of Marcus's crimes and the revelation of my financial success. Detective Chen had provided regular updates on the investigation, and the scope of Marcus's deception continued to expand. Marcus had been stealing not just from George's business, but also from Beth's children's college savings accounts that he'd helped her manage. He'd been skimming money from David's small business consulting fees by manipulating invoices and payments. The total theft across all family members exceeded $70,000, and the manipulation had been going on for over 3 years. "The hardest part," Beth said during our family meeting that afternoon, "is realizing how many times I defended Marcus when other people questioned his behavior. Janet's parents had been warning her about his spending habits for months, but I told them they didn't understand his ambitious personality." David shook his head ruefully. "I actually gave him access to my client payment system because he convinced me it would streamline my bookkeeping. He's been stealing from my consulting business for 18 months. Sarah squeezed my hand as we listened to these revelations. "Herbert, you were the only one who didn't give Marcus access to your finances. Actually, he tried, I admitted. Last spring, he offered to help me set up a more sophisticated business banking system. He said I was missing out on tax advantages and better interest rates. I thanked him, but told him I preferred to handle my own finances." "What made you suspicious?" George asked. "I wasn't suspicious exactly. I just value privacy and independence when it comes to money. Plus, my current system was working well for me." Dorothy reached over and patted my knee. "That instinct for independence probably saved your business and our family's financial future. If Marcus had gained access to your accounts, he might have stolen enough to destroy everything." The conversation turned to the children's recovery from the New Year's Eve trauma. Tommy and Emma had been seeing a family counselor who specialized in helping children process adult conflicts and betrayals. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been working with them to understand that adults sometimes make poor choices that have nothing to do with the children's worth or behavior. "The kids are remarkably resilient," Dr. Martinez had told us during our last session. "They understand that their uncle's actions reflected his problems, not their value as family members. Your response to protect them from further emotional harm was exactly right." As we sat in the living room that Saturday, I watched my parents interact with Tommy and Emma with renewed appreciation and respect. Dorothy was teaching Emma how to knit patiently, guiding small fingers through the motions while praising her efforts. George was helping Tommy build a complex Lego set, asking for his grandson's opinions about design choices and celebrating each completed section. "Dad," I said quietly, "you and Mom don't need to overcompensate for what happened. The kids understand that you made a mistake, but they also see that you're working to fix it." "We are not overcompensating," George replied with a smile. "We're discovering how much we missed when we were focused on the wrong things. These children are amazing, and we want to know them better." The doorbell rang and Sarah went to answer it. She returned with Janet, who looked exhausted and nervous but determined. "I hope it's okay that I came," Janet said hesitantly. "I wanted to speak with all of you together." The room fell silent. Janet had been cooperating with the police investigation and attending court, ordered counseling. But this was her first visit to a family gathering since Marcus's arrest. "I know that what Marcus did was unforgivable," she began, her voice shaking. "But I need you to know that I didn't understand the scope of his stealing until the police explained everything. I knew we had money problems, but Marcus told me he was getting bonuses at work and making smart investments." Dorothy gestured for Janet to sit down. "What do you want to tell us, dear?" "I want to apologize for my part in criticizing Herbert's choices. Marcus convinced me that Herbert was being irresponsible and that we needed to pressure him to make better decisions. I believed him because I trusted him, but I should have minded my own business." Janet turned to face Tommy and Emma directly. "And I want to apologize to you two for supporting the decision to exclude you from gift giving. That was wrong regardless of any adult disagreements." Emma looked up from her knitting project. "Are you sorry you were mean to us?" "Yes, sweetheart, I'm very sorry. I made bad choices because I listened to bad advice." Tommy considered this seriously. "Uncle Marcus told you lies about Daddy." "He did. He told me your daddy wasn't working hard enough to take care of your family. But that wasn't true." "Daddy works really hard," Emma said firmly. "He helps people make their businesses look pretty on computers." Janet smiled for the first time since arriving. "You're absolutely right. Your daddy is very good at his work, and I was wrong to question that." The afternoon progressed with careful but genuine conversation. Janet explained that she was closing her boutique business and looking for employment that would help her pay restitution to the family members Marcus had stolen from. She was attending therapy to address what her counselor called financial enabling behaviors that had contributed to their family's dysfunction. "Marcus is getting help too," she told us. "He's in a program for people who commit crimes because of jealousy and resentment. His counselor says he's beginning to understand how his feelings about Herbert's success led him to make terrible choices." "Will he come back to family gatherings?" Tommy asked innocently. The adults exchanged glances. "That will be a long time from now, buddy," I explained gently. "Uncle Marcus needs to finish dealing with the consequences of his choices before he can visit with family again." As the afternoon wound down, George pulled me aside for a private conversation in his workshop behind the house. "Herbert, I need to talk to you about money," he said seriously. My stomach tensed. "What about it, Dad?" "Your mother and I want to pay you back for those mortgage payments you've been making. We also want to pay you interest on that money since you were essentially giving us an interest-free loan while we were criticizing your financial management." "Dad, that's not necessary. I was helping family, not making an investment." "It is necessary," George insisted. "We took your help while simultaneously questioning your responsibility. That's not fair, and we need to make it right." He handed me an envelope. "This covers the mortgage payments plus 6% interest. We also want to hire your business to redesign our company website and handle our digital marketing. We'll pay your standard rates just like any other client." I opened the envelope and found a check for significantly more money than I'd given them in mortgage assistance. "Dad, this is too much." "No, son, it's what we owe you. Plus, we've been recommending your services to other local business owners. Mrs. Patterson wants you to help her son's restaurant with online marketing, and the Johnsons need a new website for their catering company." As we walked back toward the house, George put his arm around my shoulders. Herbert, I want you to know how proud I am of what you've built with your business. You took a risk, worked hard, and created something successful. That takes courage and skill. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. I should have said it months ago. I should have trusted your judgment instead of listening to Marcus's manipulation. That evening, as Sarah and I drove home with sleepy children in the back seat, I reflected on how dramatically our family dynamics had changed. The crisis had exposed deep problems, but it had also created opportunities for more honest and respectful relationships. How are you feeling about everything? Sarah asked as we pulled into our driveway. Relieved? I admitted. For months, I thought I was disappointing my family by making unconventional choices. Now I understand that the real problem was Marcus's jealousy and manipulation. And the kids, they're learning that standing up for yourself is sometimes necessary even when it's difficult. They're also learning that families can heal from serious problems if everyone commits to honesty and respect. As I carried sleeping Emma upstairs and helped drowsy Tommy get ready for bed, I realized that our family crisis had ultimately strengthened the relationships that mattered most. We'd eliminated toxic influences, established healthy boundaries, and created space for genuine love and support to flourish. The healing process would continue for months, but the foundation for a healthier family dynamic had been established. Justice had been served, truth had emerged, and the people who truly mattered were committed to building something better together. 6 months later, I stood in my expanded home office, looking out at the backyard where Tommy and Emma were playing with their cousins during our first large family gathering since New Year's Eve. The scene was everything the previous celebration should have been: children laughing together, adults engaging in respectful conversation, and an atmosphere of genuine warmth and inclusion. My freelance graphic design business had grown into Mitchell Creative Solutions, a small agency employing 3 other designers and serving clients across Ohio and neighboring states. The referrals from family, friends, and local business owners had contributed significantly to this growth, proving that reputation and relationships matter more than corporate credentials. Sarah joined me at the window, carrying 2 cups of coffee and smiling at the scene outside. Remember when you worried that leaving corporate life would hurt the kids' future opportunities? I laughed, wrapping my arm around her waist. I remember a lot of worrying that turned out to be unnecessary. Through the window, we could see Dorothy and George playing an elaborate game of hide and seek with all the grandchildren. Their relationship with Tommy and Emma had blossomed into something deeper and more genuine than it had ever been before. The crisis had taught them to value their grandchildren as individuals rather than reflections of their parents' choices. "Daddy, come play with us," Emma called from the yard, her face flushed with excitement and grass stains on her new dress. "Coming, sweetheart," I called back, then turned to Sarah. "Ready to join the chaos?" As we headed outside, I reflected on the profound changes that had occurred in our family over the past months. Marcus was serving 18 months in minimum security prison and participating in counseling programs designed to address criminal behavior motivated by jealousy and resentment. Janet had found steady employment as a bookkeeper for a local nonprofit organization and was making regular restitution payments to all the family members Marcus had stolen from. More importantly, Marcus had begun writing letters to family members acknowledging the specific ways his actions had hurt them. His letter to me had been particularly meaningful, including a detailed apology for the years of subtle sabotage and manipulation that I'd never even realized were happening. Herbert, he'd written, "I need you to understand that my resentment of your success started long before your freelance business. I was jealous of your confidence in making unconventional choices, your ability to prioritize family happiness over external expectations, and your natural talent for building authentic relationships with people. Instead of working on my own problems, I spent years trying to undermine your success because I thought it would make me feel better about my failures." Beth and David had both recovered financially from Marcus's theft, and had developed stronger, more honest relationships with each other and with me. Beth's children were thriving in college thanks to the restitution payments and additional support from family members who wanted to help repair the damage Marcus had caused. The New Year's Eve gift ceremony had become a family legend, but not in the way anyone had originally intended. Instead of being remembered as a lesson about financial responsibility, it was now recognized as the moment our family learned the difference between authentic love and conditional approval. Uncle Herbert. My nephew Jake ran up to me as I joined the backyard activities. Mom says you're going to help me build a website for my school project about local businesses. That's right, buddy. We'll work on it together next weekend. Jake was Beth's oldest son, now 14, and interested in entrepreneurship. His enthusiasm for learning about business development reminded me of myself at that age, before I'd learned to worry about other people's expectations and definitions of success. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself in conversation with my father about the lessons we'd all learned from our family crisis. Herbert, George said as we watched the children play, I've been thinking about what happened last year, and I realized we made a fundamental mistake in how we measured success and responsibility. What do you mean, Dad? We were so focused on traditional markers like corporate employment and conventional career paths that we forgot to pay attention to the things that actually matter. Your children were happy, healthy, and loved. Your marriage was strong. Your business was thriving, but we couldn't see any of that because we were looking for the wrong indicators. I nodded, appreciating his insight. I think everyone gets caught up in external expectations sometimes. The important thing is being willing to recognize when you're off track. Marcus couldn't recognize it, George said sadly. His jealousy blinded him to everything good in his own life, and it led him to try to destroy what was good in yours. That evening, as our extended family gathered for dinner, Dorothy asked for everyone's attention. Before we eat, she said, standing at the head of the table, I want to say something to all the grandchildren here tonight. Tommy, Emma, Jake, Beth's younger daughter, Sophie, and David's twin boys looked at her expectantly. I want you to know that your grandpa and I love you exactly as you are, and we're proud of you for being yourselves. We don't need you to be perfect, and we don't need you to make choices that look like what other people think success should be. We just need you to be kind, honest, and true to yourselves. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. And we promise that we will never again use our love as a weapon to try to control the adults in your lives. You should never have to worry that our approval depends on your parents' career choices or lifestyle decisions. The children accepted this speech with the matter-of-fact grace that children bring to adult apologies, but the adults around the table understood the deeper significance of Dorothy's words. As we drove home that night, Tommy asked, Daddy, do you think Uncle Marcus is sorry for being mean to us? I think he's learning to be sorry, buddy. Sometimes it takes people a while to understand how their choices affect other people. Will he come to family dinners when he gets out of jail? Maybe, but not until he's proven that he's learned to make better choices. Our family has rules now about treating each other with respect. Emma, who'd been quietly playing with a toy in her car seat, suddenly spoke up. Daddy? What would have happened if you hadn't left the party that night? It was a profound question from a 6-year-old. What do you mean, sweetheart? If you hadn't gotten upset about the presents, would we have found out about Uncle Marcus stealing money? I exchanged a glance with Sarah, realizing that Emma had grasped something important about cause and effect. You're right, Emma. If I hadn't stood up for you and Tommy that night, Uncle Marcus might have kept stealing money for a long time. So sometimes getting upset about being treated badly helps fix bigger problems. Sometimes it does. When you refuse to accept unfair treatment, you force people to look at their behavior and make better choices. As I tucked the children into bed that night, I reflected on the journey our family had traveled over the past year. The New Year's Eve crisis had initially seemed like a simple conflict about respect and inclusion, but it had ultimately revealed deeper issues about jealousy, manipulation, financial crime, and the difference between authentic love and conditional approval. Most importantly, it had taught me that protecting my children's emotional well-being was more important than maintaining artificial family harmony. By refusing to tolerate their mistreatment, I'd not only preserved their sense of self-worth, but also accidentally uncovered crimes that could have devastated our entire family's financial security. Standing in my children's doorway as they drifted off to sleep, I realized that the most valuable lesson from this experience wasn't about family dynamics or career choices or financial success. It was about the courage required to stand up for what's right, even when it means challenging people you love. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest, not out of malice, but out of their own fears and insecurities. Real family means supporting each other's authentic choices, not forcing everyone into the same mold of expectations and approval. When you stand up for what's right, even when it's painful, and even when it creates conflict, you teach your children that their worth isn't determined by other people's approval or disapproval. You show them that they deserve respect simply for being themselves, and that someone will always fight for their dignity and well-being. The greatest gift we can give our children isn't money or status or conventional success. It's the knowledge that they are loved unconditionally, and that they have the strength to stand up for themselves when others treat them unfairly. Our family learned that healing is possible when people are willing to acknowledge their mistakes, make genuine apologies, and commit to better behavior. But healing requires boundaries, accountability, and the courage to prioritize what's actually important over what merely looks acceptable to outside observers. As I turned off the hallway light and headed downstairs to join Sarah, I felt deeply grateful for the crisis that had initially seemed so devastating. It had stripped away pretense and manipulation, revealed authentic character, and created space for more honest and loving relationships to develop. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives turn out to be the beginning of the best changes we never knew we needed. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and protecting your children from unfair treatment? How did you handle situations where the people who were supposed to love your kids the most were actually causing them emotional harm? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, standing up for what's right, and finding strength in difficult situations. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of protecting children from adult dysfunction, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from crisis to healing. I hope it reminds you that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is establish boundaries that protect the people who matter most. Remember, your authentic choices and genuine love are always more valuable than artificial harmony and conditional acceptance. Trust yourself, protect your children, and never be afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.